Hi, I'm Chris Lopez, and this is Adams State Football with head coach Levi Gallas. This is our final episode of the 2025 season, Coach. We're going to go through the year with you, pros, cons,
Absolutely.
lessons learned.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit, though, before that last game of the year in South Dakota, because you played pretty well.
No, we did. And, I think that's, again, attributed to the type of players that we still have in this organization is they're very resilient. You go into one of those last games, you obviously want to try to walk off the field with a win, and I think that's what our mindset still was. There's a lot of things that can happen in a particular game like that you worry about. You're going on a long bus trip, you're getting away from your home crowd, the mind can play a lot of different games. And I was just super thrilled that our guys that did step on the football field continue to have that continued mindset of going out and finishing. And you saw that in the first half.
Well, I think it's a tribute, too, to you, Coach, and to your staff that your team fought to the end, that your team never quit, that you guys maintained your fight, that you had that spirit, and you saw that in South Dakota. So I think that's a tribute to you, your coaching staff, and your players that are buying in to what you're doing here at Adams State in your first year. Let's talk about the season and give us some of your takeaways of your first season here with the Grizzlies, things you learned, lessons learned. What were the things you took away from this season right now?
Yeah, I would say, right now that whole process is starting to happen with us as coaching staff and us as a department of just, okay, what are some things that we liked? What are some things that we need to work on? Obviously, the record's the number one thing that pops up, but what attributes to that record? Because I do think it takes a full 12 months to prepare yourself for one of those type of seasons. And, you look at it, we were a great first half team. I think we did a nice job of getting our guys prepared and ready to go and going and attacking those situations and the teams that we played up against and, getting our schemes ready to match what type of defenses and offenses that we were seeing. And so I think with continuing that idea of keeping the same schemes, keeping the same terminologies, I think that will only create growth throughout the offseason that I think will help us moving forward. I think, the halftime is something that we truly need to look at. What are we doing in preparation for having that break in a game? I think there's a lot of different avenues. You could look at nutrition, travel, sleep. When are we doing our walkthroughs? What are we doing pregame? How are we combating it in the practices? What are we doing to analyze that situation? I think a lot of it could be depth. We were a type of team that, didn't have a whole lot coming out of the springtime, and so we were putting a lot on these new student athletes in this organization. And when you go into that second half, if you do everything in the first right, sometimes when you're just relying on one or two guys for that particular position, you get tired. And it happens. And I think maybe that was probably a contributor to it. But, for year one, I think really laying down the foundation, really putting in discipline into this organization, making sure that what product that we are starting with is going to help us in the future. And I think that was a big contributor to us as well.
Yeah, that halftime transition was perplexing at times.
It was.
In just watching, because going back even to game one against Western New Mexico, and you had momentum.
Yeah.
And then that second half, third quarter period, that was always coming back and biting the Grizzlies here this year. That's an interesting puzzle that you'll work to solve in the offseason.
Yes.
One of the things I wonder about, Coach, is, and I don't know how you're going to handle this or if you're ready to look at that, but you served in dual capacities as the defensive coordinator and the head coach, and I know we talked about that at times during the season in terms of that challenge for you and taking on both of those roles. And I don't know how you see that moving forward, or if you have the luxury yet to think about that organizational structure.
The interesting way of putting it. Do I have the luxury to think about it? I do. I can think about it.
Think about it, right? That's fine.
No, but it is something I think about. I've thought about it. I've talked with our staff about it because it is in a unique dynamic. And I think it's important to have the right person, the right individual. But there is a sense as a head coach of wanting to make sure that you're doing what's right for the team. And so it is something that I'm continuing to look at, continuing to evaluate, because I do think that that could benefit the team with the right individual, with the right schemes, with the right personnel.
Yeah, I'd like to honestly get your dad's input on take on that.
Right,
I'd like to hear what the OG
thinks about it.
That.
I know.
That's an interesting puzzle that you'll work through.
Right.
Give us some sense of how you close down the season with your players, final evaluations you do with your team, with your coaching staff. You're going to have players that are finishing, they were seniors, they're not coming back, they're moving on with their lives. You're going to have players that come back. How do you do that final evaluation period here at the end of the season?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of started already. We brought them in right after the trip and got all the equipment checked in, make sure we had all of our pieces together, but then also had a full team meeting in which I tried to give a good farewell message to our seniors and thanking them for everything that they've done for this organization and putting forth all their efforts and contributions, but then also kind of shifting into that mentality. What's unique about college football is once you get done, you have to give them 2 weeks off. So there is no weight room, there is no recovery, but then you also have to give them a week off before finals and a week during finals. Well, what that does is that put 4 weeks back to back that we can't do anything with them.
Gotcha.
Then all of a sudden you have Christmas break. So we're not going to see our players from now until January 20th.
Gotcha.
That's 10 weeks. That's a long time. So I think, but with that, what we're able to do is start to have some of those exit interviews. So we started this week in prepping ourselves and getting a good mindset into that sense of, hey, you're going to be on your own for 10 weeks. We need you to start pushing. Obviously, take a little bit of time to relax, recoup, rethink, all those type of mentalities that need to happen after a season, but we do need to start to get our mindset ready to climb this thing now. And I think preparing our guys for that allows us to have an even more impactful spring and more impactful mindset going into this offseason.
It sounds like, as you explain the break that you give your players, that you have to give your players under the NC2A rules, it sounds like come January or so, you have a reorientation or a reintroduction
a little bit
period for those players that you're really counting on coming back.
No, and I think that happens within each semester and each break. You think about last spring, I was trying to get them to understand who I was, get them to understand who the staff was, what we were about to try to embark on together. But reintroduction is a better word. This spring, now it's like, hey, you know what to expect. And now we need to crank it up a notch. And you know what you're getting yourself into. I'm not going to change. We're going to continue to push this thing forward. And now it's that reintroduction. But hey, let's hit the ground running even more.
When you think of your off season or you think of this evaluation period that you're going through now, at what point do you start thinking about your practices, the way you practice, the way you bring players in? When do you think about those things in terms of any adjustments to your drills, any adjustments to how you run the team, things like that? Just kind of, I guess, the self-evaluation.
Absolutely. I do it in a 12-year span, or 12-month span, sorry.
Yeah.
In that every time something's happening, I'm writing it down and I'm journaling it. In that in my head, I've already got 12 months ahead of me planned. I think it's important that you do that as a head coach. There is that self-reflection and making sure that you wrote that down, talked about that, making sure that going into that next spring ball, that next spring workout, that next summer, that next fall, that next season, you are constantly keeping note of those type of things. But that again has begun way before, like right now, I've got the next 12 months kind of ironed out of how I want to see it and how I want to adjust to it, and continuing to self-evaluate those moments, because we all forget. You go into the next season, you're like, golly, I remember there was something we did in travel that I didn't like. What was? No, I go back to, my notes and making sure that we made those adjustments and cleaning some of that stuff up.
And this might not be a fair question to ask per se, but I wonder about how you approach, or if you approach, those players that you are keen on, want back, see as leaders. want to make sure they're here. I don't know if you have those conversations, are able to have those conversations, or how you impress upon your team that you want them back.
No, and I think that's happening right now in our exit interviews. And so each student athlete, they come to me. I kind of schedule out a time in which I get to meet with them. We talk about what's happened over the season, my expectations, their expectation, and I think that's where a lot of the feedback ends up pouring into of, you know, we do want you. We do see this you. This is your future. This is how we're going to get you better. Those type of conversations begin to happen. And I think you need to have those conversations so they understand the expectation going into the spring. I ask a simple question with every single one. Are you tough? You know, are you tough? Because I think to embark being an Adams State Grizzly, you have to be tough. And when I ask that question, most answers, yes. All right, explain to me. How are you tough? Because going into this next offseason, we need tough individuals. We need people that are ready to be a part of this Adams State community and continue to push this thing forward.
When you think of your team now and looking a little bit ahead to next year, are there areas that you want to particularly focus on as you go into that recruiting season, or as you think of potential transfers? Are there areas of the team that you want to focus on, or are you still the whole team, I need everything?
I think they're two separate entities. You have what are a transfer, and I really am wanting to push to try to get any type of transfer in at mid-year so they are embodied by this culture change. They're embodied by this toughness of what we're trying to develop, the standards that we're trying to instill on them. But then as a whole, we've got to get a next group of high school freshmen. We've got to get that next, because I truly believe at the high school ranks, they're the ones that are still able to develop. They're the ones that are still able to understand what it is that you're trying to do as a culture and as a program. And we need to continue to build that. So as I see them as two separate entities, I'm a true believer that high school is number one. We've got to focus on that area first. Transfers, again, are those select few that we know will fit.
That's an interesting, I really find that interesting to try to think how you see that and how you're thinking about that, because you have talked a lot about the commitment Adams State is going to have to the high school football players.
Oh, yeah.
But we also know this year you relied on transfers.
Oh, yeah.
We met several of them that came in from California that transferred here. So that's an interesting way you have to think about that. Where's my priority? How do I do it? That's just a big challenge.
No, it can be, but I think in done in the right way with a lot of discussions and getting everybody in the right mindset. We had 45 guys at the end of spring last year. Our team was 120. So you split that up into thirds. You had a third of high school, a third of carryover, and a third of transfers. That is a melting pot of individuals. And now as you translate into the next spring, you want that number to be a little bit higher, in which you don't have to have a third of each. Now you can separate that dynamic and be, again, having a big class of high school, but now your transfers are a little bit lower, and now you have this carryover. That's how the organization that I want and that we want to see built is, again, having that good foundation, sprinkling a little bit of transfers, but getting that next class in.
Yeah, that's I think going to be a really good strategy for you when you think of high school football. Is it a focus in Colorado, or is it a focus beyond the state of Colorado when you start to evaluate high school athletes?
No, I think if it was a perfect world, I would just say Colorado. But in all actuality, we're competing against, 4 or 5 other institutions in this state that are going to be grabbing at the same guys that we think have quality talent. So you have to focus on Colorado. You still got to go into those dogfights and out-recruit them, build those relationships even stronger, share your vision in trying to get those individuals that want to be at Adams State. There's guys out there that don't want to do this, don't want to go there, don't want to be a part of that. They want to be at Adams State. And we've got to recruit those individuals continuously. But with having those battles, we know we're not going to be able to fill a full high school class of just Colorado. So we're going to sprinkle in a little bit of Arizona because we know we've got a lot of connections still out there. Maybe a California individual here and there because of the connections that we've built in our previous times. And then, we're looking a little bit at Utah too as well. We've always thought about New Mexico, and we continue to reach out to New Mexico. What's unique about that relationship is they have the lottery. And so a normal student is going to get the lottery and still be way cheaper than anything that we can do. And so that kind of gets a little tricky, but I still think there's 2, 3, 4 guys out of New Mexico that we can get.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're right about New Mexico. They offer in-state tuition. They pay for it for their students. Graduating from New Mexico high school makes it a little bit tougher
why
to go
wouldn't
in there. To go in there and recruit. Yeah, you are absolutely right about that. Hey, we're going to take just a really quick break because I want to give a shout out. We've seen him here.
I know. Joel's been on
a few different times.
A couple times, yeah.
Here as we tape here at the San Luis Valley Brewing Company, and that's RG Banks, Joel Polkowski. He's been promoted to Assistant Vice President of Mortgage and Consumer Lending. So we wanted to give a shout out to Joel because we've had Joel here on the set with us a couple of times.
Yeah, he's talked to her. Yeah, he's come up here. His families have been here. It's been awesome.
Yeah, and we've appreciated RG Banks supporting this episode and every episode of Adams State football with Coach Levi Gallas. Coach, when you think of the off season, there really is no break for you, or I don't know when you get a break, because you've talked about mapping out already 12 months going into next August when the Grizzlies will start their second season under you.
Yeah.
But that's a full off season. Give us some sense of the hours you put into recruiting and how you do the recruiting. Do you go to games? Are you in parents' house? Give us some sense of that world, of the recruiting world.
Yeah, so I've really been lucky enough to kind of be in different parts of the world or the nation to kind of see what recruiting and how it's different. You go into the Midwest, a lot of those kids have already committed. They're done. And I'm just talking about Division II. Division I's a whole different animal, but Division II in the Midwest, a lot of those recruiting classes are already done. You come into more of the RMAC world, it's starting to get picked up pretty heavy. And so what we tried to do is be a little bit different in taking some of that mindset that the Midwest does and building those relationships starting in the summer. We were able to put on a couple high school camps and create some offers. We had about 3 game day visits that we had over 40 plus kids at each one of our games, and continuing to build those relationships. And then as we move into the December months, that's when we're going to start bringing in official visits. But you talk about recruiting. We dropped off 2 individuals at the airport on our way back from South Dakota Mines. We sent 2 more out the next Sunday, and then 2 more out on Monday to embark on that recruiting adventure. And so right now, me and 1 other coach are in the office out of 11 of us. The rest of them are out right now recruiting. They're doing it all sorts of ways, at practice, at games, home visits, talking to high school coaches. I think relationships is what Division II is built on. Everybody might have a little bit more money than the other institution, but how you gain, the right type of people to your programs is building the right type of relationships, and that starts all the way back in July.
So you assign your assistant coaches or your coaching staff to certain areas that you want to recruit in, you want them to focus on.
Correct.
And you have them out on the roads pretty much nearly now.
Yeah, so we sent 2 coaches out to California, 1 in the SoCal and NorCal, to really start hitting those junior colleges that we have connections with and relationships with. And then in the meantime, we sent 2 coaches out to Arizona to start the high school process out there, an area in which we weren't financially able to get to in the spring. So there is some of that new, hey, I just found a kid, hey, I know about a kid, that kind of happening both in Arizona and in Utah. And then when we come back from Thanksgiving break, all 11 of us are blitz in Colorado, and we'll be out for the next 5 days right after Thanksgiving break.
Do you hear from, or how helpful is the alumni football base of
Awesome.
Adams State, and do you get leads, tips on players from alumni?
Oh yeah, we get them all the time, and again they come in mass numbers, and so you're trying to filter and just making sure that, all right, is that an actual need that we want? If it's not, being respectful and getting back. Sometimes I get blitz from Facebook to Twitter to emails to phone calls, and trying to navigate and making sure that we get it to the right regional coach that's recruiting in that area. But golly, have we had a huge inpour of information from our alumni. You talk about California, Arizona to Colorado of alumni saying, hey, we understand the product you're trying to build, or we've been associated with those teams that you've been associated with. Hey, this is the type of kid that fits. And so being accepting to that, I think, is really important.
As we've talked about, there are a lot of opportunities for football players to play at the Division II level, and a lot of opportunities for programs like Adams State to build their program up because of the talent that exists out there. And you can get we talked about the competitive nature of Division II football, a great brand of football, really great athletes. You see that, and you saw that with the Grizzlies. And so that pool out there just shows that Adams State has an opportunity to build its program. And I don't know, you have a lot of motivation going into year 2 now.
Yeah.
What's the message you share with recruits, with families of recruits, as you try to land them here for Adams State?
That's a great question. I'm not a big used car salesman. As much as I want to pride myself in being able to sell ice to an Eskimo, I don't think that's working in this day and age. I think what's truly working, because of the transfer portal, you sell them something that's wrong and they get here, they're not going to buy in. They're all of a sudden going to be disciplinary issues, and then boom, they're going to bounce out. How does that help you? I think right now you have to be real. I think you have to be real when you talk to the individuals of what they're getting themselves into. Hey, when I have a conversation with a recruit or I have a conversation with parents, I'm going to tell them everything about what's going on right now and tell them the exact product that they're about to get themselves into. I'm looking for somebody that's tough. Simple as that. Anybody can walk down the street or shoot it out on Twitter, I'm tough. I want to know why. What makes you tough? Because coming into this situation is not going to be easy. But if you get the type of Valley people that we are and that are tough and resilient, that the great things can happen. And that's what we need right now, is we need more tough people in this organization. And so that's what I'm trying to recruit to.
When you talk to some of the transfers you brought in this year, particularly the ones we met during this season from California, elsewhere, what are you hearing back from them now here at the end of the year? Were they happy coming here? Do they give you insights of, coach, maybe this, or coach, maybe this guy, or do you get that type of feedback from those senior players or those leaders you have?
Absolutely. I think it's important that I have that conversation with them, because they now understand what it is that we're trying to do and who we are, and they are going to be the ones to say, nah, Jimmy's not going to work out, or you know what, you need to recruit Steve. He's a good one. He'll fit what we're trying to do right now. And I think it is important to have those conversations with your transfers. Although, sometimes as they come in, they see it, they see it for what it was. Maybe it's not what they want to do. And so they're going to, again, if they're coming in as a transfer, they're more willing to transfer back out. And so sometimes that does happen. And that nutrition of transfers is going to be a thing probably within this next year to 2. But once we build that base back up to where we have a good foundation, I think transfers are going to realize what they get into a lot earlier.
Well, we've really enjoyed hanging out with you this football season. We've learned a lot about Grizzly football. It's really been, for us, great to hear you as the new coach and what you want to put in place and what you've been putting in place this year. And the word toughness is what comes out. I think at the end of the day, when you think of you and you think of the Grizzlies and where you're going, you talk about that toughness. You want that mentality on this campus. I want to give you the last word around that.
No, I think it's just embarking who we are as San Luis Valley people. It is not easy to live in an area in which it is beautiful one time, and then all of a sudden it gets real cold the next. Like, that's who Alamosa has always been. And being able to endure those winters has created us and given us tough skin. And I think you need to recruit that same identity to this institution. You know, we have a lot of great things going for us. You look at our facility to anybody else in the RMAC, and every single time people are wowed by what they get to play in and what they get to be a part of. We have a great administration in terms of our president and being embodied in the athletic programs. You know, I see him at every single basketball game, football game, volleyball game. Like, he is bought into what we're trying to do. Yeah. Caitlin Smith is just constantly trying to push the envelope within terms of our athletic programs as an athletic director. And so when I can incorporate, hey, I want a tough kid, and I get to show him what's actually going on here, I think it's a great combination.
You know, and the other thing, this is what I thought about as I was listening to you, because we talked about this, about the campus and the campus atmosphere and the culture of a campus.
Yeah.
And what you established this year in terms of that culture for Adams State football, for the campus of Adams State, and I think of the other schools you recruit against in the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference. Adams State's campus is one of the prettiest, one of the best small campuses you'll find in America.
I agree.
And that, I think, just that setting of Adams State, the football stadium, the dormitories around the football stadium, the atmosphere you've brought into game day, which held throughout the year, I think that culture, Coach, is going to be a game changer, difference maker for you as you go out there and sell Adams State football.
No, I absolutely agree. And that was the conversation with me and Caitlin in trying to change that atmosphere. I don't want to just change it for a good time for a year. We are building something to sustain major success, and we are building something to sustain, you know, having those major victories happening. And that went into everything that we looked at.
Hey, we want to thank you for joining us throughout the year for Adams State football with Coach Levi Gallas. We want to thank RG Bank for being our presenting sponsor, and we want to give a big shout out to San Luis Valley Brewing Company for letting us come in here every Thursday and doing this show from the brewing company itself. One last note, Saturday, November 22nd, you'll see the Adams State Grizzlies running for gold. NC2A Division II Cross Country Championships in Kenosha, Wisconsin. You can watch the live stream via the NC2A Division II website. It's a really good, clean live stream. You get really good action if you're a cross country fan. Adams State goes into those NC2A Division II championships as a favorite to walk away with both the men's title and the women's title.
I can feel it. You see it's gonna be a good weekend.
We'll be back next year with the second season of Adams State football with Coach Levi Gallas. A shout out to our guy Owen Woods, who's behind the camera making this show happen. See you. We're going to come back in February. We'll talk more about recruiting then.
Yeah, let's come back right after signing day. Let's talk about.
Good season, Coach.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate you.
Go Grizzlies.
Go Grizz.